Hey y'all, this is Pastor Brian. Today is Thursday, the 27th of February, 2025. This is our weekly midweek video. We sometimes talk about scripture. We sometimes talk about faith, life, what's going on in the world. We have been reading through scripture leading up to the season of Lent. This is our last video before Lent begins, I believe. I think next week's video will be in the second half of the week after we have started Lent, but we've been looking at scripture during that. Sorry, I kind of my brain just paused and kind of broke. I'm back. We paused and we looked at scripture. We've been pausing and reading scripture during these leading up to Lent. We've been reading stuff that's kind of seasonally appropriate, that's scheduled in this time of the year. We're going to jump ahead for this upcoming Sunday, which is Transfiguration Sunday. And I'm going to preach on the Transfiguration, so I'm not actually going to read the scriptures here because I'm going to read those in worship. So if you want to kind of hear full engagement with the Transfiguration, come to worship on Sunday, online, in person. It's the live stream page of our website, or you can worship with us in person. I just kind of want to pause and talk about how beautiful the story of the Transfiguration is, how important it is. It is often referred to as scholars will call it a misplaced resurrection narrative. I don't like the word misplaced, but it is, in many ways, it is a resurrection story that happens. It is an out of place, might be the better way of putting it, resurrection story. Jesus gives the disciples a glimpse of the resurrection before he dies, right? Because in the resurrection, we see who Jesus truly is. He is, he's not just some special guy. He is God in the flesh. He is the one who even death cannot defeat. He is love itself. He is life itself. He is the way, the truth, and the life. We see that in the resurrection. And so before his death and resurrection, right? So Transfiguration is really important in the cycle of the church year. It happens the Sunday before we begin Lent. And Lent can be, not always, but it can be kind of a slog. When we enter into the season of Lent, it's a time of attending to our sinfulness and attending to the ways in which we are called to grow in faith, and attending to all that is, to what is wrong and hurt and broken in our world and what needs to be put right. Lent is preparing to tell the story of the cross so that we can get to the story of the resurrection. And that can be kind of dark. And so before the darkness, Jesus shines a light, right? Transfiguration, the story is Jesus takes his disciples, his inner circle. I think it's Peter, James, and John, which are there's the 12 who are the inner circle, because there's more disciples than just 12, right? There's a bunch of disciples who are following Jesus. The 12 are kind of the symbolic inner circle. It's like Jesus's leadership team. And there's 12 because there were 12 tribes of Israel. And so this is symbolically God restoring God's people who have been, torn apart, and 10 of the tribes are kind of lost or have, been conquered and intermarried with foreigners and no longer worshiping the God of Israel in the way that they're called to worship the God of Israel. So this is, and the other tribes, Judah and Benjamin and Levi, are also a hot mess. And so this is Jesus reconstituting the people of Israel. That's the 12. And then the three are the inner circle. These are Jesus's closest people. He's got his leadership team, and then he's got his core. They're with him in the special moments when there are only a couple people. It's generally Peter, James, and John, this core three that are with Jesus. So Jesus takes them up onto a mountain, and he is transfigured before them. And his clothes shine with the brightest white, and this light is shining out of him. Some of the early Eastern, so Greek, the Greek-speaking early church, right? Relatively early on, the church divided into kind of Greek-speaking and Latin-speaking, Latin being the West, ends up being what we would consider Roman Catholicism, Greek-speaking being the East, so the Orthodox churches, Greek Orthodox, Russian Orthodox, some Orthodox churches in the Middle East. So these two churches kind of divide, not officially until the 11th century, but unofficially, and in terms of their practice, they divide. So anyway, in the Greek-speaking church, this light is referred to by some teachers and and scholars and theologians as an uncreated light. Well, there's only one thing in the universe that's uncreated. It's God. Everything else is created by God. Only God is uncreated, which if this light is uncreated, it is God in God's self. So somehow the light of God, right? Somehow God is shining through. And that's what the story is saying, is that the holy is shining through the mundane. Jesus is, he looks like he's just a guy, just another, Middle Eastern carpenter from the backwoods of the Roman Empire's, like one of their furthest outposts. Jesus is just some guy. Except he's not just some guy. He's God with us. He's God with the flesh. And so in the Transfiguration, who he really is, God among us, God as one of us, shines through the mundane and the everyday. That's the Transfiguration. And the idea is that gives us the strength to walk through, it gives the disciples to walk through the darkness that's coming. It gives us the strength to walk through the season of Lent. One of the really cool things about the Transfiguration that I certainly won't get to in this sermon, but I once heard someone speculate that it's a moment outside of time. So Jesus at the mountain of Transfiguration, he meets with Moses and Elijah, and part of it is that Moses and Elijah was seen as someone who would come back before the Messiah returned. So Elijah's there as a way of saying that he's there, getting the right people ready for the Messiah. Like John the Baptist was seen as kind of the new Elijah. Now Elijah himself is here with Jesus, the Messiah. They also represent the major strands of Israel's tradition. Ancient Israel referred to their scriptures as the law and the prophets. There are other things in there like the Psalms, but the law is like the books of Moses and the history, or the books of Moses in particular, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. And then the prophets include the books that we would call prophets, and also the histories. So, First and Second Samuel and First and Second Kings, those are considered prophetic books because there are many prophets in them. So law and the prophets means the scriptures. Well, Moses represents the law. He was thought to be the one who wrote it, or at least was the kind of the symbolic figure who is the center of what's happening in it. God's the center, but he's like this key figure in it. They're the books of Moses is what they were called. And Elijah, who's the leading prophet, the big significant prophet from Israel's past. So Jesus is encountering all of Israel's tradition. He's encountering the scriptures who are endorsing him. So the scriptures endorse Jesus. Israel's tradition endorses Jesus and shows that all of that's happening in the moment. And also Moses and Elijah are people who encounter God on a mountain. What if this person who I was reading wrote, what if the God who they encounter is Jesus? What if Moses, in that moment when Jesus is transfigured, he's encountering Moses when Moses is receiving the 10 Commandments. And he's encountering Elijah when Elijah is on the mountain waiting to hear God, when Elijah hears the still small voice. What if this is a moment outside of time that all of them are experiencing at once, right? Because God is beyond time, where somehow those moments of time come together. I love that. Maybe it's because I'm a sci-fi guy. But I also think that time is more complicated than we understand. I think that the world is more complicated. I think God, what if God is breaking through? Maybe. God is eternal. God is outside of time. God is present to all of us at once across the ages. That's just basic Christian teaching. So that's just a maybe. I just think that's a cool thing. I guess what I want you to hear, we're going to talk about the Transfiguration. I hope you'll be a part of worship. We're going to talk about the light that shines in the darkness and gives us the strength to walk through the darkness. That is what I'm sensing this sermon is going to be about. But what I want you to think about is, for this video, I guess, is the God who shows up in the ordinary. Right? Jesus just hiking with his friends up a mountain, and then God breaks out. God shows up in and through him. We have a God who shows up to us in the ordinary, and every once in a while we get that glimpse of what's really happening. Right? When we, in worship at Haymarket Church, we baptize someone. We're pouring water over a baby's head. That happens lots of times every day. Bathe your child. You're doing the same thing. Except something holy is happening. Now, something holy is happening when you bathe your child, but a different kind of holy breaks out in a baptism. Communion is bread that we buy at the grocery store and grape juice that we buy at the grocery store. Our gluten-free and allergy-aware elements are, they're not bought at the grocery store. We have to order them online. But still, we buy them through online ordering with our credit card, right? It's just bread and it's just juice, except it's not just that, because we believe that Jesus is present to us in it and through it. When we gather together as a community in church, like we're just people getting together, except we believe that somehow Jesus shows up. Jesus shows up in ordinary things. God shows up to us in ordinary things. That is the story we tell, and that's the story of the Transfiguration. Something holy breaks out. May we have eyes to see it. May we be overwhelmed by God's glory and love, and may we trust that God's light shines in the darkness. Peace. You are loved.